Okay, hi everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue à cette conférence de presse.
Welcome to this press conference. I'm Catherine Levesque. I'll be your moderator today. I am a journalist with the National Post.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland. We have the President of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada and Minister of Emergency Preparedness, Blair. We have the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, David Lametti. We also have the Minister of Public Safety, Mendicino, and the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons, Mark Holland. So the ministers will have remarks, and then we will proceed to question periods on Zoom. So if you do have a question, please use the raise hand function, and I will unmute you. So ministers, you have the floor.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Catherine. Merci beaucoup. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to first provide a brief update on the financial measures that we introduced through the Emergencies Act to target the illegal blockades and those who fund them. As I said yesterday, information is already being shared between our law enforcement agencies and Canada's financial services providers. Action is being taken. So let me repeat again what I said yesterday. If your truck is being used in these protests, your bank account will be frozen and your insurance will be suspended. The consequences for taking part in these illegal blockades are real. Si vous êtes à Ottawa, il est temps.
If you are in Ottawa, it is time for you to go home. If you are thinking about driving to Ottawa by car or by truck to take part in the illegal occupation this weekend, you should not. But I also want to say this. We have taken no joy in invoking these measures. They are unprecedented, and for good reason. The vast majority of Canadians are hardworking and law-abiding. We are all sick and tired of a pandemic that we have dealt with for almost 2 years. When this crisis is over, we will need to work hard, all of us, for the good of our country. But today, our economy and our democracy are facing a serious and foreign-funded threat. These illegal blockades and occupations cannot be allowed to usurp the authority of democratically elected governments.
We're all sick and tired of a pandemic that we've been dealing with for almost 2 years. When this crisis is over, all of us are going to need to work hard to heal our country. But today, our economy and our democracy are facing a serious and foreign-funded threat. These illegal blockades and occupations cannot be allowed to usurp the authority of democratically elected governments. They cannot be allowed to threaten peace, order, and good government, and they will not be allowed to do so. These illegal blockades and occupations will end, and they will end for good. Now, this afternoon, I also want to speak about the news that was released by the Trans Mountain Corporation a short time ago. TMC today announced their increased cost estimates and the extended completion date for the Trans Mountain expansion project to the third quarter of 2023. Reasons cited include the pandemic, the floods in BC, and significant and necessary changes to deal with the terrain and protect the environment. I want to assure Canadians that there will be no additional public money invested in TMC. TMC will secure necessary funding to complete the project through third-party financing, either in the public debt markets or with financial institutions. Both BMO Capital Markets and TD Securities have been engaged by the government to provide advice on financial aspects of the project. Their analyses confirm that public financing for the project is a feasible option that can be implemented swiftly. They have also confirmed that the project remains commercially viable. Our government acquired TMC and the Trans Mountain Expansion Project in 2018 because we knew that it was a serious and necessary investment. This project is in the national interest and will make Canada and the Canadian economy more sovereign and more resilient. La transition vers une économie carboneutre prendra
The
plusieurs...
transition to a net zero economy will take many years. We will get there. But during that transition, our natural resources are needed globally.
Expansion will ensure Canada receives fair market value for our resources. That is not the case today, while we are dependent on the United States for market access. Getting our resources directly to global markets will be good for our economy, and it will be good for our workers. TMC has signed agreements with 75 Indigenous communities worth more than $580 million, and the project will generate over $2.7 billion in Indigenous-based contract awards. Our government has also been working with Indigenous communities on further economic participation in Trans Mountain for more than 2 years, and we will announce the next step toward that important objective later this year. As we have said from the very beginning, our government does not intend to be the long-term owner of the project. We will launch a divestment process in due course. And before I close, on behalf of the Government of Canada, I'd like to publicly thank Ian Anderson, who is retiring as the President and CEO of Trans Mountain after many years of service. And let me now turn things over to my colleague, Minister David Lametti, the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. À vous la parole, David.
Over to you, David.
Prime Minister. I want to begin by acknowledging that I am speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Lorsque le Premier Ministre a annoncé aux Canadiens que notre
When the
gouvernement
Prime Minister announced to Canadians that our government was going to invoke the Emergencies Act, he also reassured them that Parliament will have the last word on the proposed measures. The process started yesterday, the first day of debate on the declaration of the State of the Emergencies Act in the House of Commons. And that is how the Emergencies Act works. Parliament plays the central role as the government watchdog.
will be able to provide more detail on today's developments and how the debate will unfold. I want to address two issues that have come up in recent days. First, to those who claim that the disturbing situation across our country is not a national emergency, I encourage them to talk to their fellow Canadians who've been living through it, the residents of downtown Ottawa, people in Winnipeg and Windsor, those affected by multiple border closures, and anyone who would join those blockades. My point is that these illegal blockades and occupations have been national in scope and are still hurting Canadians. In places where blockades were cleared, we have already seen attempts to reestablish them. They pose an ongoing threat to our economy and to our security. As we saw in Coutts, Alberta, and other places across the country, some of those involved are alleged to have had much more sinister motives than simply opposing vaccine mandates. C'est pourquoi lundi, nous devions agir.
That is why we had to act on Monday. And we are not the only ones to believe that it is a national emergency. Many provincial premiers agree with us. We know that because we consulted them. Though we are seeing progress towards the end of the illegal occupation and blockades, the situation continues to evolve rapidly. Since we declared the state of emergency, other barricades or blockages have been avoided. We have a simple objective: restore order on our streets and borders so that affected Canadians can take back their lives.
The tools they need to finally end these occupations, and to make sure that any attempts to re-establish blockades that cost our economy millions of dollars, are thwarted. The official opposition is also talking about rights. We take rights seriously. So did the progressive Conservative government that introduced the Emergencies Act and ensured that it was charter compliant. That was the right thing to do. Ne confondons Ne confondons pas l'occupation
Do
et les
not
barricades.
mix up the illegal occupation and blockades with legitimate demonstrations. Canadians know what demonstrations look like. They do not look like what is happening on the streets of Wellington, nor what is happening in Coates or Emerson. We are invoking the Emergencies Act in a limited and measured way to stop the occupation and illegal blockages. We are invoking it for those who can no longer walk the streets of our capital security. We are invoking it for the right of workers who have the right to earn a living and companies who want to serve their customers.
To be lifted as soon as possible. So with that, I'd like to invite my colleague, Mark Holland, the Government House Leader, to say a few words. Mark.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Today we were to resume debate for the second day on the use of the Emergencies Act in the House of the Commons to respond to the illegal blockades and the illegal occupation that is occurring outside of this building. On the advice of Parliamentary Security, in consultation with all of the House leaders and the Speaker, a unanimous decision was made that it was not safe to proceed with the House sitting today. Je veux dire un grand remercie pour la collaboration.
A big thank you for the collaboration of my counterparts from the other parties. It was a situation where we had to ensure the safety not just of MPs, but of all those who work here in the House of Commons. It is therefore possible for us to work virtually. Unfortunately, we need people working here in the House of Commons in person for virtual parliamentary sessions.
We're continuing to monitor the situation outside. It is our hope collectively, and I've had the opportunity to speak with all of my counterparts, that we can resume sitting tomorrow. Clearly, we are going to monitor the security situation to ensure that it is safe, not only, again, as I say, for MPs, but for those who work in the House of Commons who make sure that our session can operate. I want to say that this is an incredibly historic and important debate. We will make sure that every member of Parliament who wishes to speak will be afforded that opportunity, and that we will not allow the pause that has occurred to impact the final outcome, which is a fulsome debate to occur with a final vote early next week. Parliament will not be deterred from its work. We will not be placed in any position that will see the nation's business not being dealt with, and we look forward to the resumption of Parliament in the very near future. And now I'm going to turn to my colleague, the Honorable Marco Mendicino. He's the Minister of Public Safety and National Security.
Thanks, Mark, and bon après-midi tout le monde. Good afternoon. I want to thank you for joining us for today's update on the concrete actions that are being taken to end the illegal blockades. I'm pleased to report that following a number of enforcement operations taken by police, all major ports of entry remain open for trade and travel across the country, and this is good. I want to thank the work that is being done by police services at every level, local, provincial, and obviously members of the RCMP for their exemplary work on the ground. I would also stress that while this is a positive development, that the progress that we have made at the borders is not cast in stone. For example, we know that blockaders have made several attempts now to obstruct ports of entry again, including at the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor. However, these efforts have been thwarted thanks again to the work of law enforcement. This morning, I had a very good call with Mayor Drew Dilkens in Windsor, along with the offices of local MPs Kazmierczyk and Massé. I wanted to make sure that they're receiving all of the support that the federal government could offer. I was very alarmed to hear about reports yesterday of Windsor police arresting an individual who had specifically threatened Mayor Dilkens. And it goes without saying that these kinds of examples of violent aggression towards public officials or any Canadian are absolutely unacceptable. And I want to express my solidarity to Mayor Dilkens, who is a friend and a colleague. We're remaining in close contact with local leaders across the country. Here in Ottawa, the past 24 hours has marked an important turning point in the operation. The Ottawa Police Service, with critical support from the RCMP and OPP, have begun taking enforcement actions. Police officers from across the country, including as far away as Vancouver, are assisting in this important action. Arrests are being made, and the operation is ongoing. Yesterday, the members of the RCMP, OPP joined the Ottawa Police Service at a joint press briefing, and I expect that they will continue to be briefing on the developments of the operation. But before moving on, I want to note specifically that the interim chief of the Ottawa Police Service, Chief Bell, specifically stressed the importance and the utility of our government's invocation of the Emergencies Act. And here I'm referring to the special authorities, which have been included under the declaration that allow officers to prohibit assembly in so-called no-go zones where there can and has been a significant breach of police. We've seen over the course of the last number of days, members of law enforcement specifically issue warnings that are in consistency with that declaration. We also know that enforcement authorities and other partners are beginning to use some of the financial controls that are intended to choke off any proceeds or currencies which could be used to aid and abet the illegal blockades. As you heard, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, we remain in close contact to try and support those efforts. And finally, the RCMP are making full use of the delegated authorities to them to ensure that we can commandeer all of the assets, the equipment, and the tools that are necessary to not only maintain the efforts to end the illegal blockades at our borders and within our communities, but equally to prevent future such efforts. And here again, I would simply stress that while we've made progress, the blockades are not ended. There is an ongoing and fluid situation, and the tools that are being used under the Emergencies Act have been of great assistance. I will stress that the powers are being exercised responsibly. They're being exercised in a manner that is proportional to the circumstances, and they're being exercised in a manner that is consistent with the Charter. And as you heard Minister Lametti indicate, there are safeguards there that ensure that Sections 7 and Section 8 under the Charter are being used to inform the ways in which these powers are being put to good use. There will be transparency around this. There will be ongoing debates in the House of Commons. There will be a joint committee that is set up, and of course, a mandatory review. And it is our commitment as a government to be upfront with Canadians so that they can continue to have confidence that this is an important power that has been used sparingly, but in a manner that is judicious and responsible and consistent with the law. And this is why we invoked it. For anyone who continues to remain as part of the illegal blockade, we have a very simple and straightforward message. Leave. Leave now. Enforcement operations are being undertaken, and for your safety, the safety of Canadians, and the safety of those law enforcement officers who are on the ground discharging their responsibilities right now, the best thing that you can do is to leave. I also want to take a moment just to advise those who are watching on social media not to be posting any locations or any other information related to police operations so as to protect everyone's safety, including the integrity of those operations as they are being carried out. Over the
next few days, I look forward to continuing discussions on these topics with my colleagues. Discussions underway now in the House of Commons. The Prime Minister, myself, and other ministers and MPs started the debate yesterday, and we continue to explain to Canadians why the Emergencies Act was invoked and the impact it has on the country.
Yesterday's disturbing events near Houston, British Columbia. I'm deeply concerned to hear reports of violent confrontations at the worksite, including the injury of an RCMP officer. My thoughts are with the officer and their family. And I want to make it clear that no matter what your cause or your views are, on any subject matter, there is never any justification for violence towards your fellow Canadians, and that obviously includes the members of the RCMP and other members who work in our law enforcement. BC RCMP are investigating, and I will leave further details to them. In sum, law enforcement actions are resulting in significant progress in ending the illegal blockades. The Emergencies Act has been put into effect and is being used responsibly, proportionately, and consistent with the Charter to help keep our borders open, to protect our critical infrastructure, to keep our legislatures and our Parliament open, to keep our economy going, Canadians at work, and above and beyond all, to keep Canadians healthy and safe. And that will continue to be the focus that our government continues to show at this very important time. And with that, I will turn it over to my friend and colleague, Minister Bill Blair. Bill.
Thank you very much, Marco. Bon après-midi, tout le monde. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. I'd like to join you. Thank you for joining us here today, and I will keep my remarks quite short to allow the media to ask the very important questions I know they must have. Since taking the unprecedented and extraordinary step of invoking the Emergency Act on Monday, we have seen significant progress. These measures have encouraged those involved in these illegal blockades on our streets and at our vital international trade corridors to leave. Local police have successfully dismantled illegal blockades at vital points of entry across the country, and they have been able to defend them from further incursions and attempts to disrupt our economy and the lives of Canadians. We've responded to the pleas that we have received from provinces such as Alberta to take necessary action to fill gaps in existing provincial and regional authorities and capabilities. And the Emergencies Act has allowed police to stop people from entering downtown Ottawa to participate in the illegal blockades by establishing a secured area. And it has given the police the necessary authorities to take effective action against those who do not leave the secured area and who are participating in these illegal blockades. The residents of Ottawa, who have had to face this invasion for 3 weeks, may now begin to breathe a sigh of relief, but I know they do so cautiously. Every Canadian has the right to peaceful, lawful protest and assembly. We will always value, protect, and defend this right, but the freedom of expression reaches its limit when it violates the rights of other Canadians. This limit has clearly been reached and exceeded. These attempts to damage Canada's economy, to disrupt our communities, to even overthrow democratic institutions must be answered with unequivocal condemnation and strong action from those who are in a position of power and have the ability to do so. Businesses and residents in downtown Ottawa have faced serious harms, threats, and intimidation. These illegal blockades at our border brought uncertainty and concern to families and workers in southwestern Ontario, Alberta, Manitoba, and in British Columbia. And while our measures are time limited, we are confident that they have provided the tools, resources, and authorities that were necessary to restore peace and safety and bring these illegal activities to an end. We urge all those who are engaged in these illegal activities to take the opportunity to leave peaceably and allow the people of Ottawa to get their lives back. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I'll now turn it over to the questions the media may have for us.
Thank you very much, Minister Blair. So we'll proceed with the question period. A reminder, it is one question, one follow-up, and I'm told we have until 2 p.m. So if I could ask you to keep your answers short if possible. Alors, on va commencer avec Christian Noël.
We will start with Christian Noël, Radio-Canada.
Christian, tu peux y aller.
Go ahead.
Oui, merci.
Thank you. I was waiting to see the signal on my phone to speak. Good afternoon, everyone. To justify the use of the Emergencies Act, are you able to tell me in French what tools are being used now in the police operations? And concerning the financial measures, how many bank accounts have been frozen? How many accounts are they? Answer. Maybe I should start and give the floor later to Ministers Lametti or my other colleagues to answer your question. Concretely, the tools that are now being used by the police officers on the field include prohibitions for assembly,
pas seulement là, dans des autres places pour réguler les bougements des gens.
To control the movements of people, those who were participating in the demonstrations and illegal blockades. That's an important tool for the police force at the moment. It's a tool to clarify the fact that they have to leave right now. There are other examples. Controls to stop the flow of funds and financial contributions that could help the illegal blockades. As the Deputy Prime Minister said, these tools are being used by financial authorities and the police. Let me now hand over the floor to Mr. Lametti for justifying reasons for the Emergencies Act. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Christian, for the question. Minister Mendicino has just underscored two tools: identification
fortification des périmètres,
and strengthening of perimeters to help police officers to do their job, and also financial measures. I am sure that Minister Freeland will have more to say about that. Here, well, I'm not going to talk about operations in particular because we are monitoring the situation. The measure to order tow trucks and the drivers of the tow trucks had a very positive impact. It motivated people, and this is something we've already seen. This motivated people throughout the country. Once the law was implemented, tow trucks felt that they were covered by law, and they were more accepting of the fact that they could help the police. Before, they had been very hesitant. Truck owners are receiving warnings from their insurance companies and from police officers telling them that their licenses and insurance coverage may be lost. We've seen the impact it had on the news because people are being told that their employers have told them to come back, or maybe because of the insurance coverage. So it's working. We provided tools to our police force, and those tools are being used, and the impact is very positive. Let me now hand over the floor to my colleagues if they want to add to what I've said. Let me add something. Christian, thank you for your question. The tools and financial measures that were allowed under the Emergencies Act have an impact. They are being implemented. And as Minister Lametti has just said, it is clear that they are important and they are working. I can assure you that accounts are being frozen, and as Minister Lametti just said, companies have notified truckers that their insurance coverage could be suspended. So the measures are working. They have an impact. Concerning the details of the number of frozen accounts, the police has advised us not to speak at this time. I think you can understand that this is a very delicate situation, and we have been asked not to provide those details. But I think that obviously there's a public interest which is right to provide you with details, and we will do so
le plus vite possible.
as soon as possible.
Question de suivi, Christian?
Any follow-up question, Christian? Yes, thank you. Follow-up question. It has to do with the Emergencies Act and the upcoming vote. If the vote takes place once the assembly is ended in Ottawa, I believe I've heard many ministers say that the situation is fluid. There could be other threats at the borders. So how could you justify the use of an emergency mechanism for prevention? Are you committing not to extend the law beyond 60 days in April? David, do you want to start? Yes. Talking about the parliament, I'll give the floor to my colleagues, but I can assure you, Christian, and I can assure Canadians that we do not want to prolong the state of emergency any longer than necessary. We have clearly stated that we even want to revoke the Emergencies Act even before the 30 days, if possible. The only criterion is the safety of Canadians. Once the situation is safe, we will revoke the state of emergency. And as we've said on many occasions, as soon as possible. As soon as possible. Let me now give over the floor to Mark Holland. Yes, it is clear that there's going to be a vote next week as soon as possible. And there's also going to be a debate. Today had to be the second day of debate. I hope we will be able to continue debate tomorrow. I am certain that there will be enough time to explore the reasons why we need the Emergencies Act. Furthermore, well, that's the current situation. And we need to verify the situation with the security officers. I think the debate can resume tomorrow. That is my understanding now. Thank you. Greg Queen.
Hello. I've heard comments that the protesters must leave because they have been heard. I'm wondering if you can say after these protests, what will the government do to address the underlying anger that the protesters are representing?
I'm happy to address that. Look, I think that for all Canadians, what we have seen over the past 3 weeks has been deeply disturbing. I think that all of us feel very deeply. This is not how Canada is supposed to work. Our motto is peace, order, and good government, and there has not been a lot of peace and order. And that is why our government has taken these unprecedented actions. And it's the right thing to do. Canadians have the right to peace, order, and good government, and we will restore it, and we are restoring it. I also think it's very important to be clear that government policy is not made by people who block our ports, who harm our economy, who hurt our reputation as a reliable trading partner and a place where you can invest. Nor is government policy made by people who occupy our national capital. That is very clear, and we are firm on that. Now, having said all of that, it's really important, as I said in my opening remarks, for us as a country, once this is over, and it is going to end, to come together and really to heal our country. There are a lot of big challenges in the world today, And it's going to be really important for us to be able to face those challenges as a country. And our government is very, very determined to keep our country together and bring our country together. Ending these illegal occupations and blockades is the essential first step in doing that.
Secondly, I wonder, I heard an Ottawa City Councillor at a council meeting this week call the protesters domestic terrorists. I remember as well after September 11th, there was a lot of work around critical infrastructure and threats against critical infrastructure like the bridge at Windsor being perhaps a terrorist offense. Has anything that's been done so far rise to the level of something like that, or is this strictly within the realm of regular criminal offenses?
I'm happy to take that question first and then pass to colleagues having had some extensive experience in prosecuting anti-terrorism act offenses. I understand why people are asking the question. And certainly I would say that colloquially, if you live in Ottawa, there's no question that at times you have felt terrorized. The actions that have been taken by the illegal blockade have been devastating to the local community here in Ottawa. Absolutely devastating. People have not been able to get around, but it's not just an inconvenience or a disturbance. It's worse. It's far worse than that. And that is one of the reasons why the operation that is being put into effect right now with the assistance of the RCMP, who I want to thank, but equally the other members of police services from around the country, including the OPP, are here to help the Ottawa Police Service restore public safety. There is a big difference about how it is that we talk about the experiences that have been felt by those who live in Ottawa and what actually happens in the court of law and what's proven and what charges are laid and under what category. And I just want to be really clear that those are all decisions which will be taken by police and not elected members of the government, and nor should they be, because that's not the way our democracy works. But I think right now, if you're a person who lives in Ottawa, you just want your community back. If you live in Windsor, you just want to be able to go back to work and not have to worry about illegal blockades interrupting the supply chain, which is so critical to your employment, to your ability to put food on the table and to provide support to your family and your loved ones. As to the precise details of what charges are laid and under what provisions of the criminal code, or whether indeed they may use the Emergencies Act, as officers are now empowered to do where appropriate and where necessary. Those are decisions which will be taken independently by our law enforcement branch, as one would expect that they would be.
Colleagues, I would just add briefly that I would underline, first of all, everything that Minister Mendicino said about the impact on the people of Ottawa. You can't overestimate that intimidation, that disruption, that real profound disruption of sleep and daily life and the economy, as well as for the people of Southwestern Ontario. It can't be overstated. It really can't. That being said, we have a number of criminal code offenses, other municipal offenses and bylaws. We enacted the Emergencies Act to supplement the gaps that we found in listening to police enforcement across Canada and other provinces, other experts. We identified some gaps in terms of enforcement that would help the police. And so we temporarily have an additional set of normative powers that the police can use. Moving forward, as Minister Mendicino said, it's always up to the police to make operational decisions and enforce laws. Are there things that we ought to look at down the road as a result of this crisis? Maybe, and we will do that. I certainly, as Minister of Justice, will look at that quite seriously.
Merci beaucoup. On va passer à Raymond Filion, TVA.
Thank you, Raymond Filion, TVA. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Following up on my question from my colleague, Christian, what will it take for the Emergencies Act to be lifted? In other words, if there's no blockade from early next week, Monday or Tuesday, why will use of the act still be relevant? Answer. Thank you for the question. As you heard during our statements at the beginning, we have already anticipated other events taking place at the borders. So it's a very fluid situation. There's a lot of coordination work going on between the movements, and we are monitoring everything. Of course, our police force, working with other authorities in Canada, are identifying threats and working against those threats. So this situation is still being monitored. We are vigilant, looking at our borders and other important corridors and other important infrastructures. We shall lift the Emergencies Act when we can, as soon as possible, as I've just said, once the situation is safe and we are sure that we no longer need the tools identified under the Emergencies Act. We may revoke the Emergencies Act, but for now, we are monitoring the situation, working with the police to identify any threats, giving them the opportunity to do their job independently. Thank you. Madam Freeland, if you are not able to tell us how many bank accounts have been frozen, can you tell us how many individuals are affected by this freezing of accounts? Answer. No, I cannot provide those details. I'm very, very sorry. I agree that there is a public interest element requiring that people know the details. We shall be transparent as soon as possible. I hope everyone understands that our police is doing very delicate work. They are in charge of operational control, and they have asked the government not to provide details. So we have to respect that. Thank you. JP Casper, CBC News.
Hi, ministers. Thank you. I was going to say happy Friday, but it's probably not that happy a Friday for any of us. Minister Mendicino, you said earlier this week you didn't want to see another raucous weekend on Wellington Street like we've seen over the past 3 weekends. With that in mind, is it fair to say that all of the major enforcement actions will be carried out today?
Well, I appreciate the question. I think that those are questions that are going to have to be answered by police who are carrying out those operations in real time. And I think we on the government side have done everything that we possibly can to give police and other partners within the public safety community all of the tools that they need to, first of all, carry out this operation as peacefully as possible. I just want to make clear that no one wants confrontation, no one wants violence, and so far, I think we have seen the police do a remarkably effective job at using the tools that we have given them, including under the Emergencies Act. And the reason why I think we all hope that this operation will be carried out as efficiently and as quickly as possible is because the community here in Ottawa, and I think not just in Ottawa, but right across the country, that people have been exceedingly patient. I do worry at times that over the last number of weeks, people have felt abandoned and helpless and have, at times looked to take matters into their own hands through counter protests and the like. I understand the frustration, but we really do depend on law enforcement to do the job of keeping us all safe, which is what they're doing. And while we've made some progress, in particular here in Ottawa over the course of the last 24 hours, There's still a lot of work to be done. We've spoken before about the complexity of the entrenchment of the blockade in Ottawa at different parts of the communities and neighborhoods, but equally on Wellington Street, where there are still trucks and the like that need to be removed. All we can do in the government side is make sure that the support is there for law enforcement. And the invocation of the Emergencies Act has been an incredibly important tool for them. And specifically in delineating no-go zones, and the ability for police to draw upon those authorities to issue clear warnings, to make sure that that we're reducing the footprint of the illegal blockade as much as possible before these enforcement operations kicked into high gear, was one of the ways in which the Emergencies Act has been put to good use. In addition to that, I would also stress that, as you've heard Deputy Prime Minister Freeland say, the ability to use the Emergencies Act to stop the flow of proceeds and currencies, which could be used to advance the illegal blockade, has been effective. And finally, just through rapid deployment and making sure that RCMP have the local and provincial authorities to uphold public safety has been another measure that has concretely assisted in the enforcement operations which are being carried out here in Ottawa, which is so incredibly necessary. The people here have waited a long time to come to this moment, and we hope that obviously that the operation will be concluded as quickly and as peacefully as possible.
Follow up?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing really extraordinary images play out on our TV screens. I think it's a bit of a shock to all of us who are from Ottawa to see this sort of action. I wanted to get your reaction to what we're seeing play out and also get your reaction to some of the main organizers being arrested already. We know Chris Barber, Tamara Leach, and just a few minutes ago, Pat King. Some of the convoy bigwigs have also been taken into custody. How satisfied are you to see these folks being rounded up?
Well, I think first we want to express our gratitude to law enforcement for taking those actions. The individuals that you have mentioned have certainly been very prolific on social media, and the charges that are laid will play out in court independently. I would point out again, it is not the job of the government to be laying those charges, to be investigating them, to be accumulating evidence. That's a job for police, and if they make their way to the courts, then obviously a prosecutor and a Crown will take carriage of those cases. And we just on the government side want to see that justice is done. That is our sworn duty as members of Parliament, as ministers of the Crown, and as Canadians. And I think this kind of gets back to what Deputy Prime Minister Freeland was saying about how the country should work. If you break the law, there is a system in place to hold those accountable. And certainly there have been many instances where on the face of it, there have been flagrant breaches of the law, causing great harm to Canadians, really upending our way of life, not only at our borders, but in our communities. And we're really relying now on law enforcement to do the job. And I think we're seeing some very encouraging developments on that front. But as to how the charges will play out and what follows, we have an independent judiciary who will make those decisions, adjudications, right from the beginning to the end. And we put our faith in those institutions to do that as well.
If I could just add one thing, is that okay? JP, you used the word satisfaction, and I just want to say this is not a day when any of us takes any satisfaction. For me, this is a day of real sorrow, but also determination. Sorrow because it's painful for me that this is happening in Canada. I think it is painful for a lot of Canadians. I think we see our body politic really being violated by an illegal occupation of our capital, by blockades of our essential trade corridors. So it's really sad. But it is also a day of determination And it is a day when I think everyone in our government is very resolute. A liberal democracy must be prepared to defend itself. And that is what is happening in Canada right now. That is what happened with our invocation of the Emergencies Act. And anyone who seeks to undermine our democratic institutions, who seeks to undermine our national economy, needs to know that we are very firm and very clear about our duty to Canadians to defend our country.
Thank you very much. I'm told we have 10 additional minutes for questions. So if we could keep questions and answers short, we're going to try to squeeze in 2 more reporters. So we're going to go with Jacques Gana, Toronto Star.
Hi, good afternoon. My first question is for Minister Freeland. We learned this week that citizens went. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Sorry about that.
No worries, thanks. Hi, my question is, the first question is for Minister Freeland. We learned this week that citizens went to court in Ottawa to get a court order and succeeded to get a court order to freeze accounts and digital wallets of some of the convoy organizers, leaders. I'm wondering, why didn't the government do that? Why did it fall to citizens having to do that?
Well, first of all, let me say we absolutely welcome citizens using the courts, using the Canadian judiciary and the legal system to have their rights defended and upheld. That is a very good thing. In terms of the financial instruments which our government is using right now to act against these illegal blockades and illegal occupation, we reviewed very, very carefully the tools at the disposal of the federal government. And we used all the tools that we had prior to the invocation of the Emergencies Act, and we determined that we needed some additional tools. Now, some of those tools, we will be putting forward measures to put those tools permanently in place. The authorities of FinTrack, I believe, do need to be expanded to cover crowdsourcing platforms and payment platform and their payment providers. So that is something that we need to do and we will do, and that needs to be in place permanently. Some of these other tools, like the sharing of information between law enforcement and financial services, and the requirement of financial services to be reviewing their accounts proactively, and the immunity from prosecution that we have provided to them in doing this. These are extraordinary measures that we absolutely believe are necessary in the current circumstances, that are having an impact, and let me also point out, having a peaceful impact. And the other aspect of the financial tools that I would point to as being really effective and important is being clear that insurance on trucks that participate in these illegal occupations and blockades will be suspended. So we didn't have those tools. I don't believe that those tools should be part of the toolbox of a government in ordinary times, but they are necessary in these extraordinary circumstances, and they are having a very clear impact.
Doc, if I might add, individual citizens always have a right, if they've been damaged economically or physically, to go in front of the courts and using statutes, using common law principles to argue for compensation from the people that did the damage. And that's what they're doing here, and getting injunctions and that sort of thing. And those cases will be heard in the courts. As a government, we have to set general rules using criminal law and other administrative authorities that we have. We've done that. We have a criminal code, and we have added, with the Emergencies Act, as Minister Freeland has pointed out, other powers that we did not have before. in a similar space, but using a very different kind of tool to address that problem. And they are serious. We will obviously apply them in a balanced way in accordance with the Charter. Let me assure Canadians first that we will do that. But secondly, we'll always continue to look as a government, I as Minister of Justice, Minister Freeland as Minister of Finance, to look at these tools to see which ones are necessary going forward.
Thanks. And as a follow-up, perhaps this is for Minister Lametti. I mean, is going to court to get an injunction, this seems to have happened quite fast for these citizens and their lawyers saying that the government's moving too slowly to freeze accounts. Going to court to get an injunction to freeze accounts, was that not always a tool and still is a tool that the government could have used?
We can freeze accounts where we have evidence. We can try to get accounts frozen, especially under the powers we now have, where we have evidence that they were used for illegal activity. In this case, these blockades. The citizens who are going to court are going on a different basis, which is they have been economically damaged by the activities of somebody else. It's very, very different conceptually. We as a government are acting as we can, which is to create laws and then letting the police apply those laws in our case, and financial institutions to cooperate with the police authorities as it goes forward. So it's a very different set of circumstances, and in general, applications for injunctions tend to move very quickly.
Merci. On va avoir une dernière question de.
Thank you. One last question from Raphaël Kirou, Agence Kwame. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. My question is, I believe, for Minister Lametti or Madam Freeland. A while ago, you said you would not like the act to be prolonged over time. Are we headed for a world where, if the act is used for prevention, a world where the act will become perpetual? What indicator would enable you say we are not dealing with any threats anymore? Answer, if I may start. Thank you for your question, Raphael. The act per se is temporary. The act as it is written is temporary, 30 days. Yes, it can be extended, but it takes another process, another justifying process and the approval of Parliament. So it's not something that can be done easily. So this Emergencies Act is temporary. It will be used in a targeted and measured way to address some specific issues, and that is what we are doing. Once those conditions are no longer there, we will either revoke the act or let it go after the 30 days. But sincerely, we want to do away with it as soon as possible. Let me add two things. I totally agree with Minister Lametti that these emergency measures are, by their very nature, targeted, measured, and essential and temporary. Concerning the financial measures, I talked about FinTrack, the Center of Analysis of Financial Transactions. I think we've understood that FinTrack needs wider expertise because the financial system has changed, and FinTrack needs the skills that include those crowdfunding platforms and cryptocurrency platforms. We shall take measures to do that. Thank you very much, Madam Freeland. You have talked about changes that will be permanent when we look at the banking sector that will enable accounts to be frozen. If those changes take place, maybe not necessarily to freeze accounts, if there are some changes which will become permanent, if I understood you well. Actually, I just want to know if ever there's a change in government, will this not lead to some abuse? Answer. Maybe I did not explain myself well. The permanent changes concern only the authorities or powers of FinTrack, the analysis center. The financial system has changed. The financial system now includes crowdfunding platforms and cryptocurrency platforms. Our institutional system, the FinTrack system, should have the power as it has now with financial institutions. Now we need to modernize the authorities of FinTrack to include these digital economy platforms. That's the only aspect that requires modernization of our system, our financial system. Great, thank you. I want to thank the ministers for staying a few extra minutes. The press conference is over.
A bit longer, so have a great day.
Merci.